for our last discussion of the day, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Amanda.
Thank you, Susan, and good afternoon. The National Coalition for Infant Health has long recognized the value of breast milk, human milk, for infants. We know a diet made up exclusively of human milk can be much more than food. It's quite literally medicine, proven to dramatically reduce risks for tiny babies, especially those weighing 2 pounds or less. So protecting infants from deadly necrotizing enterocolitis, sepsis, and other dangerous comorbidities, a diet of human milk can offer life-saving benefits. But as awareness of human milk's benefits has grown, so has an industry to meet the growing demand for donor milk. So today we explore an important yet complex question. How do we ensure that donor human milk is safe? Similar to human blood or plasma, donor milk is a biologic that can transmit viruses, bacteria, and toxins such as drugs. But donor milk remains underregulated by the FDA. So to take a deeper dive on this topic, I'm pleased to welcome two panelists. Dr. Martha Dawson of the National Black Nurses Association will join us again. Welcome, Martha. And we also have Scott Aker, Chief Operations Officer of Prolacta Bioscience, which is the first and only company to offer a complete line of human milk-based products used in the NICU. So thank you both for joining us. Scott, now I know you served in the blood and plasma world for many years and then transitioned those skills to create what I understand is one of the largest human milk facilities in the world. So when you think about how the industry and the demand for human milk has exploded in recent years, do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I believe the growth of the human milk industry and the ability to provide human milk and human milk-based fortifiers and other products to babies in the NICU is absolutely a net positive. But that's required that there be a pretty huge increase in the amount of milk that is collected and processed to be able to keep up with that growth. And if you look at what's publicly available from the nonprofit milk banking industry, they are growing leaps and bounds each year in the amount of milk that they are collecting and that they're processing, and we're no different. But we have a graphic that I would ask that you put up that really shows how rapidly the industry has grown over the past decade. When I started with Prolacta back in 2007, there was a relatively small number of milk banks, most all of them in the nonprofit world, that were providing milk. Since 2011, roughly, there's been an absolute explosion in the number of milk banks, and also importantly, in the types of milk banks. There are now both nonprofit milk banks and then milk banks like Prolacta that are providing other types of products. We provide fortifiers. Other commercial milk banks are providing different types of donor milk. And those donor milks are not all the same. And so what type of milk is provided may be incredibly important to you that are providing these products to the babies in the NICU. And right now, there's no regulation that specifically says, how do you collect milk? How do you process milk? And so while I do believe growth in the industry is absolutely a good thing for babies in the NICU, I think there needs to be some additional requirements, and including things like clinical trials for products that are novel.
So let me ask, for someone who's a decision maker in a hospital system or even a new mom considering donor milk, what are the hallmarks of quality and safety that we would want?
Well, I think as it's always been, how donors are selected, how they're tested, and how the milk is tested remains incredibly important. And understanding how your milk bank is doing that is something that I think every hospital that's using these products should understand. But as I said, there's also the processing of the milk, whether you're making donor milk or human milk-based fortifiers. And in the last few years, what we've seen is an increase in the number of donor milk products that are uniquely processed, whether that be high temperature sterilization of the milk, powdering of the milk, these are not things that are well established and tested. So, for example, when human milk is subjected to high heat processes, sometimes up to and including commercial sterilization, certainly there's going to be a beneficial effect in terms of, eliminating pathogens, and from a safety perspective, there may be an advantage there. However, you also have to recognize that those high heat processes are likely damaging some of the bioactive components in human milk. And we know that bioactivity is incredibly important to the effectiveness of human milk in preventing comorbidities of prematurity. So hospitals should really be not only looking at how the milk is collected, but how it's processed and what data exists to support that those unique processes that are being developed are providing human milk, donor milk, that's going to have the same benefit to the babies in the NICU. I think clinical studies of these products are absolutely necessary, and hospitals should be asking to see that data.
Thank you for that. So now, Dr. Dawson, you're looking at this from a different perspective, but also with a real interest in the question of safety and quality. In 2016, your organization, the National Black Nurses Association, adopted a resolution about creating a culture of safety in human milk. And part of that was requesting that the FDA clarify its plans for safety regulations. So is it safe to say then that you saw these coming, these safety issues?
Yes, our nurse leaders really became acutely aware of the different methods of screening and testing of human milk, and also the lack of consistency in best practices in the industry. So what we did is we asked our Women's and Infants Health Committee to do a deep dive into the literature and the science around this growing practice. And what we discovered really is there is no standardization, a requirement to ensure patient safety. And now remember, these are most vulnerable premature infants. And like we stated earlier today, again, this is another disproportionate, I would say, health issue within the Black communities. And the number of infant mortality in the African American and Black communities from this premature issue continues to grow. And so we know that there's potent benefit from human milk. And we also support and recommend that, at least for the first 6 months of life, that, we try to give infants, human breast milk. However, we have to be concerned about the safety.
So Dr. Dawson, let me ask you this. Sometimes regulation can have a dark side, right? Unintended consequences. And there are those who worry that FDA regulations could stifle the donor supply. I think there are others who might say regulations are simply unnecessary. How would you respond?
Well, my belief is quite different because I feel like it's an accident that is just waiting to happen at this time. So in the early 70s and I would say late 70s and 80s, I was a young nurse at the bedside in the ICU when we first started experiencing AIDS and HIV. And so when many patients during this time was dying because of tainted plasma, we had to stand up and take notice, and we have to take action. So no one knew until it was too late most of the time that it was coming from the blood product. Now let's add to this today, the pandemic that we're living in, and we don't know what is on the horizon. So this includes, legalization of marijuana, opioid crisis, the use of nicotine and vaping. So we must be forward thinking, and we have to be proactive to protect our infants. And so I really believe we already have a pattern that we can follow, and that is what we do with our blood and blood products. These kids are our future, so we have to protect them.
Thank you for that. Scott, can you share what FDA might consider in terms of regulating human donor milk in an ideal scenario? What would that look like?
Absolutely. I think current regulation of donor milk, and you said it at the very beginning, is under regulation of donor milk. Donor milk is basically considered a food, which is within the purview of the FDA's regulation. However, the food regulations don't really envision a scenario where you're collecting a biologic material from one person, processing it, and then delivering it to another person. Within the food regulations, however, any food that's intended for use in infants as a replacement for human milk is typically considered an infant formula. And there are specific types of infant formulas, most of those that are used in the NICU today, that fall into a subcategory called exempt infant formulas. And these are formulas that are designed to meet particular needs, medical needs of infants, and are subject to very tight regulation by the FDA, but also are allowed to have deviations from what you would see in, say, a typical infant formula. Our fortifier products, for example, are regulated as exempt infant formula. So we have conversations with the FDA on a regular basis about what's in our products, why it's appropriate for the infants. But most importantly, what this does is it requires that manufacturers have these conversations with the FDA when they bring products to market, especially products that may have a unique manufacturing process. It requires that you demonstrate through evidence, and that may be clinical trials with the product, that the products are appropriate for their use in the infant population. And it steps up the oversight from the FDA in terms of inspections. For example, we generally have the FDA visit us for a week or so every couple of years to check on what we're doing, look at our records, make sure that everything that we're doing is exactly as we said we would do. And now this would require that the FDA classify a donor milk product as an exempt infant formula. And that's something that I know we are working with legislators that are interested in this problem. They are asking FDA, how would that work? What are the challenges, and how can legislators help to make that happen? So I think there's interest both from our side in the industry, and then also from the legislator side in terms of seeing a higher level of oversight of donor milk.
Thank you. And thank you both for this. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, can I just add also that we have to understand that regulation protect both the recipient as well as the donors, and that we do support having a very safe supply of human milk. And we have to look back again, just at the historical aspect. When we began to regulate blood and blood products, that did not decrease the supply, but actually it started increasing the supply, and it made patients feel safer to know that there was some level of oversight to ensure that they were not receiving tainted blood. So I think we just need to take the same approach and move with our young infants when it comes to human donor milk.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Dawson.
Dr.
I think that's a
Dawson.
great point.
It is, and thank you both for this interesting look at donor milk safety. I appreciate the conversation today. That's all the time we have, but look for resources from the National Coalition for Infant Health on this topic in the resources section of today's live stream page. And keep an eye out for new educational resources on human milk and infant health in the coming months. Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.